What's the name of the graveyard, for God's sake?
Monoteur.
Martin? So here we are in Martin-Friedhof graveyard in Cologne, and we're about to embark on a spiritual journey to visit the graves of two heroes, Holger Czukay and Jackie Liebzeit, members of the iconic, wonderful innovators that were Can. We've been here before on a rainy day in the dark, and were unable to find their graves, and then we got locked in, which was kind of scary. But now we have come here a little earlier. We've got sun, light, and Brigitte here has a map.
I have a map this time, yes.
Yes, so we've got a better idea where they might be. The problem is it's a very big place, and
as you can see.
As you can see, right. So what do we know?
Well, I know that we came in this way,
Yeah.
and I think that's around about here.
Mm-hmm.
We know that they're in T-zone,
Mm-hmm.
but there's two T-zones,
Mm-hmm.
so that's where we came undone last time. We got
Okay.
trapped here in after dark.
Right.
So the T-zone that we walked along last time was around about there.
Okay.
And this is the second one, and I think from what we saw on the internet there was around about 73. That's where they was.
Okay. So can you decipher that and send us in the right direction?
I'll try.
Okay. That way.
Also, I think we realised last time these little stones here on the edge are actually
Markers.
They're actually pretty mouldy, but they have markers. B? E.
That's E. So, you were saying about being here in the atmospheric, snowy.
Yes, I woke up one morning and I just love that sound of snow. It's like this this blanket of silence.
Yeah, yeah.
And you wake up.
The sound of silence.
Yeah. I had this idea. I thought next time it snows and there's enough snow, I'm definitely going to the graveyard because it's. I mean, look at this place. It's a beautiful park. I mean, it's an amazing resting place. Of course, I managed to get here just before closing. At one point, I just got really tired and cold and realised, I think it's probably time to go now. And it's starting to get dark, and that's when I realised the gates were locked. And I was, the only one stupid enough to be locked in the graveyard on a snowy evening in Cologne.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting how it's so inviting somehow to be in a place like this, and yet it's often deserted. I mean, you get the occasional person who is actually visiting a dead relative, you know, and visiting their grave, but generally whenever you come to a graveyard, especially one like this, it's deserted, and it's such a wonderful place to walk around and soak up the atmosphere of history and all the questions about the people and who they were. And
exactly, and all the names. I find it fascinating, learning all these different names of people and the years that they
the dates,
you know. Not to mention the art. I mean, look at this. Look at these beautiful these sculptures.
Look at this one here.
I guess this is to get our bearings because it's not very clear.
What does this map tell us that your map doesn't tell us?
Well, it's the same thing, but at least.
But it's green.
It's green. It's official. Yeah. So this is this is the first one where we went the other night. Okay?
Yeah.
And we came in somewhere around here.
Yeah.
And now we have to somehow. Okay, this is where what ours tells us is that. So this was the first section where we came in was the old Ehrenfeld graveyard section. So we have to go deeper.
We have to go deep in the woods. Well, I suppose the problem is too many people are going to die.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
many people are going to die. What can you do?
The
whole planet would be a graveyard.
Yeah.
If everybody had a grave and everybody was buried.
This is probably prime real estate here too.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like it's. I think. Oh look.
Wow, modern art grave.
And then next to it is that one.
And that too. Look at that one.
Yeah, really.
I mean, somebody must be. To think that somebody makes a living out of designing gravestones. Can you speak English? I was just wondering if you knew where Holger Chukai and Jackie Liebezeit's graves are. Because it looks like you've been here a while, and it looks like you have wisdom, and we thought maybe we should ask you. Oh, okay. You don't like German music? Ah, really? You like Oasis? Okay, well then, see you later.
I just saw the pyramid in the distance.
Okay. Ah, Jackie. Yeah, man. You're my favourite drummer. Wow.
Wow, we found you after all this time.
It must have been in the 80s. The record company girl, I think her name was Brigitte. I was going on about being in Cologne and talking about Cannes, you know, just blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh, yeah, Holger Chukai, yeah, I know Holger. I said, you know him? And she said, yeah, I could probably give him a shout. Would you like to meet him? And I went, what? And she called him.
Really?
Yeah.
That's right there.
Yeah, and she called him, and we had a day off, and we arranged to meet him. And that night we went to a cafe. I think it was Richard and I, the drummer. We went to this cafe, and there was Holger sitting there.
Really?
And had a right long chat with him about music, and he was so nice. He was really sort of answering all my fanboy questions, you know. I was always a fan. I mean, I saw Cannes live it must have been 1974, 1975 in Liverpool. And I was a big fan early on. I mean, I know Jackie and Holger weren't too fond of the term krautrock. I think they didn't really like that term, you know. But I was, that's what we called it then, and that's what people call it still to this day. Oops. And I saw them live and was a massive fan. I had all the records. And then Holger Chukai started making these really interesting solo records, which were so strange. And he made this one, Movies. I just Cool in the Pool. He was kind of like the records was sort of funny and intellectual and ironic and witty and experimental and catchy and obscure, and they had all these aspects about them. It was just always a fascinating journey, you know. And he had this thing where he was editing tape and splicing tape together. So he had all these radio bits of material he'd recorded from the radio. And which he spliced together into the rhythm of the music, which was really groundbreaking and painstaking work. I mean, before people were, I guess he was actually splicing tape before the easier task of sampling things and putting them together came up, you know. But Holger Schöring, that's his real name. And that, and who's...
Did he get Chukai from?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, he was born in Danzig. So I don't know if there's something to do with a Polish connection. Is Chukai a Polish? CZUKAY? I don't know. And that's why it's got Ursula Schöring next to it, because he obviously, she married him. She took his name, which was probably on his passport. I don't know. But I didn't even realise his name was Schöring until recently. I always thought, oh, Holger Chukai, that was his name, you know. But you know, he made records with David Sylvian from Japan, and David Sylvian's real name is David Batt.
That's a cool name.
Yeah. So B-A-T-T.
Okay.
So I guess you know, Alice Cooper. That's not his real name. Did you know that? Cliff Richard, that's not his real name.
Cliff Richard, really?
No, it's Harry Webb.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Elton John, that's not his real name.
No, I didn't.
That's Reginald Kenneth Dwight.
Yeah, Reginald Kenneth Dwight.
And what was your first impression when you first saw them live?
Well, I guess I was like 16 or 17. I mean, it's so long ago that I barely remember it, but I do remember it. I do remember I have a vague image of them being on stage. Because Holger, he used to do that other thing, that interesting thing, because he was the bass player in Can, apart from doing all the recording and the editing and all that, putting the music together, he used to wear his bass over his shoulder, but not over his head.
Yeah.
So he had this, and he used to hold his bass up like this. So he had this very funny stance when he played the instrument. So I remember that about the concert.
That would have been quite different.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't... I mean, anything by Can I buy. You know, bootlegs, tapes, singles, you know, anything. I'm just a real nerdy fan of Can. And the other thing about them is they had a hit, didn't they? That's the thing. They had a hit with "I Want More," which I guess got in the British charts. I don't know if it did well in any other place, because they were sort of more known in England than they were in Germany, I think. I was reading something the other day about Tangerine Dream. Because I've become friends with Jerome Froese, so I was just doing a bit of reading about Tangerine Dream, and they were saying that when they were signed to Virgin Records in England, they were selling six-figure record sales.
Really?
Yeah. At the same time, you know, Phaedra, which is like 73, 74, over 100,000 copies, but in Germany, 6,000 copies. Yeah, yeah. Maybe 100,000 was the world. I don't know. But Germany was only 6,000 of that 100,000. You know, they didn't sort of sell very well here at all.
And how come England picked up on that vibe then?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was something to do with Virgin Records, Richard Branson, and that his label, because he had Mike Oldfield, and he sort of built this label on a sort of an eccentric instrumental album, which, you know, sold zillions of copies, and then he was able to build a label which supported more underground acts, and they had their own studio, and I guess he was signing strange music, like Faust, another German band. They're just signing odd, arty, underground music, which we've got to be so people talk about Richard Branson these days, as the entrepreneur that owns a airline. Yeah. But to me, he's the guy that, started the underground music. He was an innovator in the underground music scene. One of the guys that supported all the interesting music that was happening. While there was glam going on, and the pop charts, and disco and rock, but there was the underground as well, which was all these kind of crazy German bands and all kinds of strange English arty groups and folky arty groups, folk rock, and progressive rock, I suppose. But before all those bands got really big, there was all these crazy guys doing all the interesting stuff. And the interesting thing we were talking about this before, the interesting thing about Holger Czukay is he died, see the date, 5th of September 2017, right? And his wife, 28th of July 2017. She was born in 1962, and he was born in 1938. So there's 24 years between them, and so he was 79, so she was 55, right? So she died first.
Yeah. Do you think he...
And I think he died of a broken heart. Because I read something. I read.
And then the other one just can't live without them.
Yeah. I read somewhere that the circumstances of his death were unknown.
Really?
They didn't say what he died of, because I think Jackie, who will go over there in a minute, Jackie Lieberzeit, I think he died of a heart attack, didn't he, Jackie Lieberzeit? Lung. Oh, pneumonia, that's right, I read, pneumonia, died of pneumonia. Was he a big smoker? So he died of pneumonia, so he had weak lungs because he was smoking his whole life, and if he was smoking hash and stuff, it's probably, but Holger's cause of death was still unknown. Holger. Ursula. It's like he died 5 weeks after her. Wow.
She died on her birthday.
And she died on her birthday. Okay, so Holger's grave, and then just here, a few paces away, Jackie Lieberzeit, Cannes drummer, born in Dresden, 1938. My favourite drummer. The thing about Jackie was they used to call him the human metronome. And I kind of like drummers with feel and organic and connected to the music from the feel of it. But Jackie, even though he had that metronomic style. It just was so unique, and it was just hypnotic. Can, he was the engine, he was the mood, there wouldn't have been anything without his drumming. Here we are over Jackie Liebersite's grave, and Olivia and Matthias are both going to leave drumsticks at his grave. The first T-zone was over there, wasn't it? Should we head that way, didn't it?
Yeah, it was near the memorial.
You know, just have to look charismatic.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you know.
Right.
I don't know about how we would be.
Hey, you!